it did not seem to us that there were real specific goals or objectives that were identified certainly at the organizational level. And that flows down to the department level too, because the departments want to base or ideally should base what they're doing off of what the board wants to do. This is not a quick process, and it's one that you have to be committed to do. I know, Chris, you've had more experience with this. What are your...
Several of them. One of the ones I did when I was in short one was the board voted 4-3 on every issue. And at night after the board meeting, 4 went to this bar and 3 went to this bar. I couldn't go. So
You went to both bars.
So, but I really had one both of them was tough. But one of the things I said that is that I suggested that we get together and talk about your goals and objectives so you can really figure it out. It wasn't pretty, I think just figuring out a night took about a month when they're gonna meet. But it was a great process and they still didn't like each other after it was done. But, they set some goals and they were all happy about them. And that gave staff a lot of well, I know what we're doing now. I know what this board wants, for the town in the long range. So it was very successful, I thought, and, we don't do these too often. I think, our firm doesn't. There's a lot of great firms out there, and some of them are very reasonable to do. If you have measurable priorities for your staff, you can measure what people are doing their jobs, or how they're doing their jobs, or meeting the goals, not doing their jobs. I think it's one of the best methods to get when two kind of boards change. I've always felt it was very successful, and I was telling the administrators, if they're on a strategic plan, do that. They'll help you get your measures, what you have to accomplish. So I was really strong when we did this. I thought that was good. It takes a year, though it's not an easy process. It takes a long time. And I think they run, depends, 10 to, I'm seeing for 80, but 10 to 25,000 is probably for a good strategic plan. From what I see. Again, we don't do those, but there's a lot of folks.
You might wanna, and I've seen, it's difficult even when we get proposals for strategic plans, to have the organization really articulate what it is they want done. I guess my own bias would be maybe get a request for qualifications, which would just be asking a consultant how they would approach the strategic plan. I've been in some ridiculous ones, or you get the little sticky thing and put it on the thing that means the most to you, and then at the end they take the butcher paper down and that's your strategic plan, and that's not terribly useful. But there's others that get so far in the weeds that you don't even complete it. So
we can send a copy of someone else's plan. I think the town of Rome has one that I thought was pretty good. So I can send a couple. So you can look at it.
That'd be great.
And you might not, we're just hitting everything that we thought of. You might not do all this next year, right? Because we understand you got a budget, but at least it gets things started.
Will there be like a list of firms that are suggested?
Sure, we can come up with some names. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, so my next slide was, and that's a little bit of a longer topic here, improve financial procedures. So, we'd start with everything in here is things that we see in other communities, so there's nothing bad going on here. Your money's accounted for, but there are some practices that we think could make your organization stronger. So we'll start out with fund balance. We would recommend that you have either an ordinance or I would say an ordinance, and I'll pause here and I'll tell my big bias for ordinances. And the code company was happy when I was in charge because we spend a fair amount of money updating our code. And so people would say, well, why do you do that? That's a waste. Why not we could do it in-house, type it up. you'll be doing all this over again, or another board will be doing, it's like Groundhog Day. If you don't codify this stuff, write it down, have it in a place that doesn't change, that has a procedure for changing it, that's available to everybody, you're gonna end up like every other organization I've been at, where what's the I think I can buy something up to $3,000, but if it's a, if it's a brake job, then I gotta go to the board, and it's this massive like memory game of what the rule book was, and so not just for financial procedures, and I'm not picking on the staff or board members at all, this is just very common, and so I'm a big believer that you would take your chapter 11, I think, which it is, it's reserved right now, and you start a financial ordinance. And, we had done that at the county, we had one ordinance, and today there's probably 50. I don't know that that's a measure of success, having more laws, but it sure brought things under, it made it manageable real quickly, and I liked it for the protection of me and for the protection of staff, particularly when you get into purchasing and other financial procedures. I don't wanna have to guess what authority I have to buy something. I don't want you to come back later and say, brother, what did you do? You didn't have authority to do that. So that's why I'm a big proponent of those ordinances, and I'll keep coming back to that. But the first one was a fund balance ordinance, and we think that you would benefit from having that. And Chris, you 15% generally?
Well, the auditors usually have 20%, 15 to 20, that's, I think you're, not far below it, but it's hard to get a fund balance, especially if your tax levy status is really tight, where it's hard to, so it's not an easy thing to do, you have to really work at it. I used to do it, people thought it was crazy, but we used to give, part of the review process of our department heads was, well, okay, we know what your budget is, but, we really want you to get 2% excess in your budget, work hard. And, that was part of their goals, to save money during the year. We budgeted, not that we budgeted loosely, because we didn't, believe me, but it was a goal. How can you save money to get us some extra cash to build that reserve up? It's kind of guerrilla tactics in order to do it, it's very difficult.
But it is amazing over time, and that's the other piece of this, and so many governments suffer because if it can't be solved in 18 months or 6 months, then they don't do it. And that's a long-term project that Chris is talking about, and I always liken it to, take whatever, find the money in the couch cushions, wherever you can get it. And it's amazing when you set it as a goal, in a short amount of time, you can actually build something if you put your mind to it. And so having, it was interesting, because when I started, the taxpayer groups were angry if you had a large fund balance, right? Because, well, you shouldn't be taxing me then. But later we found out it was pretty cool, because we didn't have to borrow any money ever, and so we saved interest. And so it gives you a lot of flexibility. It's prudent, conservative financial management to have a decent fund balance.
I did go to Wisconsin Towns Association on this, and they did say that, like, what's written out there, what's official is 15%. But they recommended going to a CPA, so I happened to be across the table from a CPA, and he goes, it really depends on your business, but it could be as much as 100%. So it really needs to be sized for your operation, and so we'll just have to, I guess, talk about it.
You're talking with your auditors, and, your own comfort level, I think, is, a big part of it, whether you're conservative. I liked having money on hand, because it gave you a lot of flexibility.
Yeah,
You could save.
we usually have an audit comment about our fund balance, and we're like at 19 or 10%. So, and she always mentioned that it's a little low, but we're okay, because as a government, we're not here to make a profit, we're here to maintain our services.
Right, but if we can save money and interest, that would be awesome.
Right.
My-
I mean, that's all that around my show at my
And our
house.
interest goes into our general fund
I mean,
and
that's
other expenses.
Good conservative.
So,
I
we
mean,
do
that's-
quite well with interest, we do, but it goes.
We spend a lot of money in interest, Mr. Buchanan.
Yes.
Every year,
Spend it. All of our.
waste a lot of money But that's what we're working on.
That's what we're on, so.
That's part of this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the candor, and yeah, it has to be a long-term goal, constant goal. You can do amazing things in time with a goal. So,
In business, you always hear that, like, in government, you don't use it, you lose it. So it's always like, well, we're not gonna give out government, just because we have money, we're gonna spend it. And so I think it's just that difference in order to save the money and set it aside, yeah. Identify projects for the money, as you say, that, you know, have those kind of goals. On the business side, it's more goals about saving as opposed to maximizing the budget spending.
our second suggestion here in financial procedures is fund accounting, and currently utilize separate funds for debt service and landfill. Capital funds are accounted for in the general fund. I think Chris had taken a deep dive here, but you're suggesting a separate capital.
Well, it does go through the, sort of like, know that, but,
I'm sorry, I have a hard time hearing you, Chris.
oh, me too.
I don't know if you can use the mic to share with Dave or
Oh,
what.
so, I'll speak louder. I just,
Michelle can come up to her mic, it's really hard.
I think there's not a segregated capital fund.
And our auditor has never suggested for me to have one.
Right, and I did talk to your auditor briefly, who I know very well. She worked with me many years. And one of your capital fund has to have a revenue stream in order to make GFOA standards, you have to have a revenue stream for it. So the point was trying to create, it's very difficult with tax levy limits these days. Back when I was more active, we actually levied to the capital fund, and then you had interest income and borrowing and other things. And it was a way that you could, maintain, a fund balance for capital projects as well. And and segregate your funds so that it mixed with the operating. And it's a very simple thing, but it's hard to fund that independently if you don't have levy dollars, as you know, right? So, figuring out how to do that, is maybe difficult, but I think your auditor was really, I think she could help you do that and figure out how to get that capital fund going. I think it's a simple thing, but I think it'll help the board, it helps transparency and all those good things, so.
You talked twice about a revenue stream. What exactly are you referring to and how does that become developed?
Well, a fund, in order to be a real, independent fund, like your debt service fund is, or your landfill fund, which has interest revenue. So you have to have a source of revenue, you can't just create a fund that doesn't have any revenue. So you have to have revenues and expenditure, so a revenue stream could be from tax levy. It has got proceeds from it every year, or not every year, I don't know if you borrow every year, but, every 2 years. It has interest income, create some interest income, and, impact fees can go in there. So there are several revenue streams.
Utility fees, if you did.
If you did that, so you could, it has to have a revenue stream, and, that's the tricky part, the levy part is the tricky part. Because then you can levy for capital projects rather than borrow for them. But because of the tight levy limits, it's very difficult these days, it's not as easy as it used to be. But, so does that answer your question, what a revenue stream is, maybe I did?
Sort of.
So,
Dave?
I'm perceiving this to be things that we can create charges for that get passed on to the taxpayers,
That
correct?
wasn't my intent, no.
you can actually use levy dollars and put it in as your revenue stream, so you could tax, it's just a way of keeping track of the fund and being able to track the
It's
purchases
just tracking.
and savings and so.
And they'll have its own fund balance at the end, so you can,
Carry
in
it forward.
theory, you can create, and save for future purchases as well, rather than borrow
This one's a big deal for me. It's probably one of the main reasons why I ran for office. What we do, 10 years ago, we were borrowing $200,000. This last budget was 2.2 million. I know we didn't go there, but the point is, the borrowing has gone out of sight. And even Ellers, in one of the reports on the fire district, basically was saying you can't borrow your way through supporting that fire district. And so I know the village does it. I know a lot of places are able to do a capital fund. We just got to find a way to do it. I think that's it.
It doesn't really solve that problem of borrowing, because borrowing is because of levy limits.
Sure.
It just helps, it creates maybe a mechanism to help that in the future, but there's no panacea, is that the right word for
Yeah,
not
it's-
borrowing,
Well-
it's hard.
Dave, you took Waller County from debt to out of debt. That happens with hard work. It doesn't happen through a lot of borrowing. So, I think it's just a disciplined approach that we gotta
Yeah, it's
get our arms around.
all about setting the goal, and I mean, I don't wanna harp on old county stories, but yeah, we were in debt up to our eyeballs, and we had a $23 million OPEB liability, and so it was just, the first year we did that, we had, the one was $23 million, we put $300,000 into a lockbox, right? It's like, you're crazy, you're never gonna pay that off. We paid it off in like 3 years. People are motivated, the staff is motivated, they can see that. Nobody likes a mortgage at home or their, whatever, their MasterCard debt, everybody wants you wanna pay that off, right? So you set that as a goal, and you understand that, money's tight too, so you're not gonna, shut the doors to town hall. But if you set it as a priority, and even if you fund it with $10 in year one, you will, you'll get to a better place with that. Our next point in terms of finances were direct and indirect expense allocation, and so what this is really talking about is the overhead, if you will, the cost of one department supporting another department, for example. And this is also can be a little bit controversial because it's bookkeeping, right? And so it's just a lot of bookkeeping because it's just, we get money in, we pay the money out. But there's advantages to doing some of those calculations when you're drawing down grant revenue, particularly to be able to do a full cost accounting of a program. The other thing is that you may find that one department is subsidizing another department, and that might be okay, but it's better to make sure that you've got, you know what each program is costing you. So,
And it's not as big here because you don't have a lot of departments, but, there is some room for, improvements and the one I find, I don't know if it's in, here, liability and unemployment and all those insurances, in a lot of cases, they budget just in the general fund. Now, here, I don't, no, just in the general government, they just put the clerk's budget usually. And, that should be going to the police, so you know how much police, and I don't remember.
I can't hear you.
Oh, I don't remember, sorry.
Well, why don't you stand?
Sure. I was just saying, in East Troy here, you're small, but I've seen a lot of communities, where the liability in the workers' comp insurance, for example, is all goes to the clerk's office. It's not allocated to police, or it's not allocated to public works. I don't think that's the case here, but it's just an example of, trying to get it, the health insurance sometimes is in general government, and it's not allocated. So just to look at those things, I find it's a better cost accounting.
Yeah, well, in our health insurance, life insurance, that is all allocated in departments. The general liability workers' comp is just overall. We don't have it broken down between departments.
Yeah, and it helps you understand how much the other departments are costing, because like police, no fat for the police, but, police is the highest, versus yours, which is, 0.25 per $100.
She had a hangnail, it was horrible.
But yeah, it's a, it's just a thing you need to look for in your budget. little detail, we even look, I look at a little detail, so that's why.
And financial controls was our next topic in terms of, improving financial procedures, and that, again, this is nothing, there's nothing earth-shattering here, like a lot of small municipalities, you'll get some, comments from the auditors here. Chris, you talked to them. I think it's more a matter of maybe just having a process to outbrief with the auditors and maybe taking some of the financial controls and putting it in that chapter I talked about. And there's limits to what you can do, because in terms of division of duties and things like that, because there's only so many of you, but taking those to heart, I think, is a recommendation. We had engaged the services of a financial consultant, so
Did you have the annual budget?
I got the annual budget coming up here.
Oh, okay, I must have stapled this wrong, I didn't use yours, I used mine.
Controls. She'll put in. Yeah, we're going to number 7. Okay, so, financial consultant, there's consultants out there that can work with you, and it's another resource. I know we had one that I heard so long ago, I forgot what they even charged. Chris, what kind of, what would you expect them to pay for somebody, or how would you go about
A
it?
financial consultant?
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned others, for example. They, charge about $250 an hour. So that's all they do from an hourly rate. But if they're gonna come in and analyze your debt, they'll do that for free, obviously, but they make their money when they borrow for you. So that's how most and 90% of the communities have financial advisors. They just don't borrow from the bank. You know, there are some communities who just borrow from the bank. A financial advisor will help you, I think, borrow more smartly. They'll give you, they give you the big picture, they help you on your big picture budgeting, they help you on your levy limit worksheet, how you can maximize that. So it depends, some things are hourly rates, and some are, they charge you as part of the borrowing, Baird and others and all those. But they may save you money too, by, consolidating your debt or, paying off some of the higher interest debt, So they look at all of that. You're not as complicated, but I think you might, worth giving a call to an Allers or a Baird and have them look at it and, I think you can benefit from it. I really do.
Yeah, especially, if you have outstanding debt now, they can provide you with some options. I was always, because I didn't like to borrow, so I was always real skeptical, because they get paid by having you borrow money, so I always kept kind of an arm's length relationship with them, because the answer was sometimes, or oftentimes borrowing. But I think, again, you could do like an RFQ or something as well, and just test the waters. There's places out there, and if you have that, if you're going to be borrowing, I mean, Baird did really well with them. They were great to work with until we got out of debt. They helped us get out of debt.
And then there's like Allers and some of it, Baird will help you with your daily stuff, but a firm like Allers or PMA, they'll actually help you look at your levy limit worksheet to see if there's any, not that, I'm using that as an example. I've always had others look at my levy limit worksheet to make sure that I do it, I draft it long term, not just an annual thing. How does what I put in my levy limit worksheet this year helps 2 years from now? So, as an example. So there's a lot of things that financial advisor, even if it's a one-time review of all your stuff, that's all you need. And they may say, hey, you're fine. But I think it's a really important point.
All right, financial planning was our next advice here. The town should consider a longer-term financial plan that extends beyond the annual budget, encompassing both capital and operational expenditures. So Some ideas here were establishment of a pavement management plan with at least a 5-year time horizon, establishment of a capital equipment replacement plan. You've got a good outline, but extend it to 5 years to match the length of other recommended capital plans. Stormwater management plan, those are high-ticket items that you definitely want to plan out well in advance. You've got space that you recently redid, whether you want to do anything different with this space are all things that would require good financial planning. And it helps you balance the peaks and valleys here, so you're not, the levy, and establishes a priority of the projects. The other thing that I really liked with the long-term capital plan, or even a 5-year capital plan as the administrator, was there ought not be any surprises on the plan. Once in a while it happens, but if you're coming in for a current budget year and the department wants to buy, a new fire engine for $1 million, my first question is, where was that on your capital plan, right? It should be something like that. You need to know 5 years, you may need 10 years in advance, right? So it helps, it keeps everybody honest and helps people, think about not just this guy, it drive me nuts that everyone was focused on this next current budget year, and I could struggle to get people, look at the capital plan, we're gonna buy this $30 million building, aren't you interested in that? But look, you start that even in a small way, and I think it'll pay dividends for you.
Well, it also helps you plan your debt and maximize other revenue sources, but also helps smooth out your debt and interest payments, so, yeah, it's a key thing. And you have some shreds, some outlines of capital plans already for, roads and equipment, it's just tying that all together is what you need to do, sorry.
And then I just had a generic purchasing procedure here as our last, and that just kind of closes the loop with that chapter, whatever chapter your code. I'd be a firm believer in establishing that. I think purchasing is a big area that I like to nail down in the code for everybody's protection. I won't beat a dead horse because I used that example before, but typically these purchasing ordinances, and you've got, people could articulate generally the same version of this, but I think you should incorporate it in your code of ordinances is at what authority can purchases be made? Oftentimes it's a dollar amount. A department head can use $3,000, $5,000, $100, whatever it is. You establish that authority, and also how things are purchased, probably more important. Are competitive quotes or bids required? What does it mean to get bids? Those are all, all things that can be defined in the purchasing ordinance. I included in the appendix some ideas of just example ordinances that, just a couple of other cities. I think I had Glendale and Baraboo in here, but it just gives you a flavor of what you can have in a purchasing ordinance. And again, I've never seen an organization that hasn't codified it. I've never seen people remember what the rules are. So I encourage you to at least start there, and that can be a collaborative session at the board with what are your current practices, what would the departments like to do. People were angry at me because sometimes I'd set too low of a limit, so I didn't revisit it for a while. So hey, Bretl, it's 2020 now, you should raise the dollar limit. So just it's important that everybody's on the same sheet of music, because I think I see more misunderstandings on this particular topic than any other financial issue. And it's who gave that department head the authority to buy that? Why didn't they get better quotes? Why did they go to Joe's garage instead of Sam's garage? Why, all of those things, and it just creates. They went there because they're getting a deal on their own oil change. It sets up this wild speculation where you just set a process and do it that way, and then understand. Nobody wants to pay money for repairs and things like that, but it's do it in the most cost-effective way. Chris, anything on that?
No.
Oh, any thoughts on that?